The people of the Nuba Mountains in Sudan are the target of a genocidal war by the country's Islamic government. The forces of President Omar al-Bashir have bombed the Christian and black African population. Thousands have been killed in the attacks, and Make Way Partners is a Christian ministry that fights human trafficking. It also runs an orphanage in the Nuba Mountains called the Father's Cleft. Kimberly Smith is president of Make Way Partners, and she's just back from the Nuba Mountains with some incredible stories to tell. Kimberly, why did you go to the Nuba Mountains? Tell us about your work there.
Well, Gary, we have an orphanage in the Nuba Mountains, the only orphanage operating in the Nuba Mountains that is providing a Christ-centered, loving home for more than 400 children in the Nuba Mountains. And so I spent the last month with those children.
Well, describe what is life like for the people and the children there?
Well, in my 30 days there, we only had 3 days with no bombing. And so that little window, I think, can help you to understand that the amount of terror, the trauma that the children that I spent time with and the people at large is just, it's huge. Some of the children, when they hear the bomber planes coming, they just immediately collapse. They faint. They know what's happening. One of our little boys lost his leg last year from a bomb, and to see his face and the transformation that happens as soon as they hear those bombs coming in towards them again, it's life altering for me just to experience it with them for a short time. So I can't imagine what it's like to grow up in that day in and day out.
And Kimberly, when I was there years ago, I know they were bombing schools, and there were children and even a teacher that were killed. Tell me, why are they doing this? Why civilians?
Well, it is Christian persecution, but it is also indigenous African persecution. This radical Islamic regime that has seized control over Sudan simply wants, the governor of Nuba, for example, told me they want our land, but not our people.
I know that you lived through a nighttime bombing attack, running through the dark, taking shelter in a foxhole. So tell us about that. What happened?
Oh, I had just gone to bed in my tent. I sleep in a tent while I'm there, and I had just gone to bed a few minutes before, and I heard the plane starting to come, but they sounded far off, and so I didn't get out of my tent immediately. But then all of a sudden, one of the teachers, the headmaster, was there opening my tent, pulling me out, telling me that they were drawing close. And so I ran in the dark. We couldn't turn on our flashlights because that just, any light, of course, lets them know where population are at night. And so we ran in the dark to the nearest foxhole, and we all dive in and are piled on top of each other, and it's just horrifying. You hear the children crying, you hear people looking for a foxhole, and we're all huddled in this hole late at night. And I was just flooded with so many areas of forgiveness that truly showed me the ugliness, the darkness in my own heart, sort of the metaphor there of being in the dark, afraid, and that's what was going on inside of me. And I was just flooded with forgiveness, even for the pilots flying the plane, even for Bashir, but also on a very personal level, things that I have held on to. And I found myself kissing the person next to me, and I didn't even know who that was, but just to kiss their face and feel that the love of Christ flowing through people at a moment of death. And that's what I bring back. I love the message of CBN to prepare America and the world at large for the coming of Christ. And I thought, we are that coming now. Here, we are bringing the kingdom one kiss at a time, one child at a time, saving one life at a time, sharing Christ to one person at a time. That's what we're doing, we believers here right now.
And I know from my own experience there that Muslims and Christians have gotten along well for years in the Nuba Mountains. Tell me a little bit about that. What did you experience?
It's true. We have children in our orphanage that some are Muslim. They come from Muslim families, Muslim background. Some are Christians. And these children have no animosity with each other. They go to bed at night praying together, sharing their beliefs, sharing their faith. And I believe that the true Christ just continues to emerge through his love, not through harshness and trying to convince someone that you're right. But if we can just open ourselves to the love that Christ is, he will be seen. He is seen.
And tell us, Kimberly, about that heart-wrenching story, a young girl named Nidal who came to your tent one night. Tell us about that.
Yes, she came in. She's standing outside my tent, and again, I had not been laying down very long. I wasn't asleep yet, and all of a sudden I hear, "Mama Kimberly, I am coming." And I said, "What? Who are you?" And she said, "I am coming." I said, "Inside? You mean inside my tent? You want inside my tent?" And so yes, she came inside my tent. My tent's only about 3 feet tall and maybe 4 by 6 in diameter, and so she sits next to me on the floor of my tent, and she said to me, "No, I'm coming with you to the United States." And I said, "Oh, Nidal, that's not possible." I didn't tell her this at the time, but she knows. I've been working in Sudan and South Sudan for more than a decade, and I've tried to get children out. I've tried to adopt a child, and it's just not possible with U.S. sanctions, with lack of documentation. These children are unadoptable. Most of them don't even know how old they are. There's no birth certificates. And I said, "Nidal, it's just not possible. It won't happen. I can't take you." And we ended up just in tears together, lying in my tent, lying cuddled on my sleeping bag, knowing the hopelessness of the situation there. And I have to just continually remind myself that the hopelessness that I feel is temporal. The hopelessness that I feel is this short time here on earth, but through Christians reaching out, offering support, offering prayers, offering themselves, it's not hopeless. For all of eternity, we can make a difference in the lives of these children. There was a little girl, her name was Kakai. She was only about 4 years old by looking at her, and I noticed for 3 days she stood off just over to the side while I was doing documentation of our orphans, and I noticed there was this little orange piece of paper sticking out of her hands, but I didn't speak to her. I wait for the indigenous leaders to bring the children to me that I'm supposed to be documenting which one's ours, which one can we care for, because although we have more than 400 orphans, with being the only orphan care provider, then of course there are always hundreds of children outside our gates not wanting to come in, knowing we have education, knowing we have food, knowing we have clean water. But finally on the third day, our teacher, Abdallah, our head teacher, brought this little girl to me and said, "She is one of ours, and this orange paper is from a sponsor who had sponsored her last year." And he opened up this paper, and it had holes all eaten in it from termites. And I learned that this little girl, when the bombing was so bad, 4 years old, this little girl had ran for more than a week to get to Yida, the nearest refugee camp just south of the Sudan border. And she had carried this letter with her, almost like a passport, almost like her documentation. And she had finally come back because there was no help in Yida. There were no schools. There was no food for her. She had finally made her way back. 7 days walking, this 4-year-old girl, and she brings this evidence that someone somewhere, a family here in the U.S., loves her and is providing support for her. The fact that we can make that difference, that we can save children's lives, we can raise up the next generation of peacemakers, not peacekeepers, peacemakers in countries like Sudan.
Okay, Kimberly Smith, Make Way Partners will be in continued prayer for your ministry and for the people of the Nuba Mountains. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.